All right. Well, super excited to have on the podcast Uriah Guilford from Productive Therapist. How you doing, Uriah?
I'm doing great. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining me today. Really excited to talk about productivity and growth for private practice, group practice owners, that sort of thing. Before we get into the things that you're passionate about and your expertise, always love to hear a little bit more about who you are. So tell us what you do first, and then really want to hear your story, where you came from, how you got to do what you're doing today, and I'll let you take it away.
Perfect. How many hours do we have on this podcast? I'm kidding.
6.
It's long form, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's good for SEO. I'll transcribe it. We'll put it
Perfect.
on the blog there.
Pages and pages. Good, good. So I am born and raised native of California, and I am married with two daughters and live about 45 minutes north of San Francisco in kind of the wine country area. Not a bad place to be most of the time.
Yeah.
And I have been, let's see, gosh, I'm I'm turning 20 next year in terms of my years of being a therapist.
Wow.
So I've been a marriage and family therapist. That obviously goes back to my intern days, but we used to call interns. So I've been doing this a long time and have a group practice here in my area. I'm serving teens and families mostly, but we also do some other things, but it's really focused on teens and young adults. So I've been doing group practice for 5 years now, which has been a really cool, interesting journey. And then productive therapist was actually born out of solving my own problem, scratching my own itch, and needing more admin support as I was growing. And so didn't actually intend to start a virtual assistant business. That was not on my sort of vision map or whatever you want to call it, vision board.
Yep.
But that's been a really cool experience as well. And so we're going into the fourth year of providing virtual assistant services to therapists specifically. And
Awesome.
I just love that in so many ways because it kind of ties in all the things that I'm interested in, and the skills that I have from understanding therapists and business, as well as being kind of a nerd about technology and marketing. And it
Nice.
kind of brings all those things together.
Yeah.
And it's been fantastic.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit more about that transition into like, oh, I've got this need or this issue going on in my group practice. How do I solve it? To then launching your own business. I know we're limited to only 6 hours, as I said. So just give us a little snapshot, because I love to hear those sorts of stories. When people kind of have this idea, this project turns into a business, and I'm sure many people would like to hear a little bit about that too.
Yeah. So let's see. I've been a fan of virtual assistants for a long time before starting Productive Therapist. And I had the same virtual assistant for actually 5 years, which is kind of uncommon.
Wow.
And it was a fantastic experience. And she was able to kind of grow with me as my solo practice grew and sort of just add hours as we went along. I remember always kind of bragging to my therapist friends, like, hey, do you know what a virtual assistant is? I have a virtual assistant. Like, I think I felt really important for some reason, but I also thought it was just really fantastic to have,
Yeah.
just to have a very small team, but to have help with certain things. So I always loved
Yeah.
that. And fast forward, I don't want to make this story too long, but had that same VA for the longest time into my expansion into group practice, which kind of happened slowly, hiring one person, hiring another person. Then we eventually got up to 10 therapists.
Wow.
Somewhere along the line there, I was no longer able to work with Gina. Unfortunately, she passed away from breast cancer. It was very, very
Oh, wow.
difficult and sad. Yeah. And so what I did is actually transition to hiring an in-office assistant, somebody to come in. So I had this new office space with an actual little space for admin person.
Mm-hmm.
Hired a friend, which I don't recommend after what happened there, but
Uh-oh.
hired a friend to come in. Have you ever done that? I don't know.
Yeah, or friends have hired me, and yeah, it can get
Right.
sticky.
It can be awesome, and then it can also be the worst decision you've ever made. So
Yeah.
that's just a footnote. Be careful about hiring friends and family, right?
Yes, yes. Boundaries are super important with that,
For
but
sure.
that's another conversation, another
Yes,
podcast
of
episode.
course. So I hired an in-office person. Essentially, he wanted full-time hours, and I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford to pay him full-time. So I got this idea from another therapist to contract his time out to other therapists that I was already friends with. So I kind of became more and more aware of the need for very part-time administrative support.
Yeah.
And it just kind of built from there. To be honest with you, I was in a mastermind group of my own, and I was telling the group, like, hey, I want to start this blog called productivetherapist.com, and I'm just going to talk about software and cool things that I use for my private practice. And I think on the back end of that, we might do some VA services, you know. And my mastermind group was like, no, that's the thing. That needs to be the thing. So with their guidance, I kind of decided to start
Cool.
off with promoting as the main offering, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Love to hear those stories. All right. Well, let's get into a little bit about, what you want to share today. I know you have lots of great tips and philosophies and just so much that you've learned from being productive in your own practice, leading two businesses. It's only two, right? You don't have another business we haven't talked about, right?
I'm keeping it to two, man.
Okay.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah. I say only, but yeah. All right. So open up your mind and let's I want to open up your mind and just hear a little bit about your expertise here. So I'll just kind of let you lead the
Yeah, for sure.
conversation here, and we're just gonna hang out and nerd out on productivity here.
I love it. I always can talk for hours and hours about delegation, productivity, and outsourcing, all that kind of good stuff. I think, if I'm being honest, one of my driving motivations, and if I had sort of a mission that I was on with Productive Therapist, it really is about helping therapists find balance in their lives and be successful in their practice, and then also have a good balance of enjoying their life. So
Yeah.
literally, we just came up with a new kind of tagline, and on the website it says, "Change the world, love your life," and then kind of subheader is world-class virtual assistants for busy therapists.
Yep.
That's
Love
what
that.
we're about, and I just want to help people have a better time. I'm not putting the words together correctly there, but
Yeah.
people, plenty of therapists that are, I would say, ambitious, that are driven, maybe entrepreneurial, probably, right?
Yeah.
And they're going after some pretty big goals, whether that's just a thriving solo private practice or a small to medium or larger group practice.
Mm-hmm.
And for all of us, when we hit those sort of goals that we've defined as being successful, it comes along with all kinds of other stressors that we
Yeah.
never anticipated, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And usually that's like, I'm seeing 20 or 25 clients, and I don't have time to answer phone calls for potential clients. I'm really behind on my QuickBooks, and any number of
Yeah.
things that just
Yeah.
kind of stack up once success starts to really kick in.
Yeah.
And those are problems that we don't know how to solve by nature of not being usually business oriented or having the roadmap for what that looks like.
Right.
I'm sure you've seen that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we were talking before we hit record here, is just sharing about my wife in the last 2 months, she went from solo to having 3 contract employees underneath her. And so she's in that place right now of just learning how to, how to balance this stuff, how to onboard them, now how to market them and get some clients for them and all that stuff. And it's going good so far, but I do hear those things that she's like, oh, I'm really behind on notes, or I need to make room for my consultation call so I can get my new hires clients, that sort of thing. And it all of a sudden there's these new problems that she didn't have before. I even mentioned about what you do, Uriah, to her. She's right outside in the living room. I was like, oh, I got this podcast episode, and we're talking about productivity and virtual assistants. And she's like, oh, I might have to check that out. So she's in that perfect, your perfect client sort of space right there. So these are the types of things that we talk about in our home all the time.
Yeah. And in order to scale a business of any kind, you have to have some sort of a team.
Hmm.
And most of us therapists start out, it's just us. Like,
Right.
very rarely do you meet a therapist that starts out with a group practice. It does happen,
Yeah.
but usually it's just one office, one therapist, right?
Hmm.
A website, hopefully. And
Yeah.
you can obviously help with those kind of things.
Right.
Um, but that's a very, a modest beginning that then
Yep.
hopefully turns into something that's more involved.
Hmm.
And I find that bringing on a part-time virtual assistant is often the best first hire, if you will,
Yeah.
um, because they can do any number of things that the therapist really shouldn't be doing. And we'll talk about this in a bit, I think. But if you look at the value of the time of the therapist, there's no reason they should be doing certain things at a certain point.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that
And
makes
there's
total sense.
a lot of things they should hand off as
Yeah.
time goes on.
Yep.
Um, Phone calls being one of the first ones, I think.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, totally agree. A virtual assistant was actually the first hire that I had in my own business,
Oh,
and
nice.
she's been amazing. I think we're going on like three or 4 years actually.
That's
And
fantastic.
hearing you say that you were with one for 5 years, so Amanda's been with me about 3 or 4, something like that. And it's just it blows your mind when you start to like just give tasks, all these things or these repetitive things that you're like, should I be doing this? And that's one question that I ask myself even today is
Hmm.
like, I find
Hmm.
myself doing stuff, jumping into projects and things. And obviously my business is different than a therapist's business, but there's in any business, there's those tasks that are repetitive. There's those tasks that you can train people to do. There's those tasks that are even just simple, but you have to keep doing them and keep doing them. And then if you just pause and ask yourself, should I be doing this? Like, is it worth it for me to be doing this, especially for a therapist who's charging 125,
Hmm.
150, $200 for an hour, and you're sitting here answering the phones or responding to simple emails that you can create some canned responses for. That could be extra time that you can be using to be interviewed on a podcast or in your community, building your authority, that sort of thing.
Any number of things the therapist that only they can do, right?
Right.
Yeah. I'm
Exactly.
curious, from your experience, how did you decide to pull the trigger on hiring that person 3 years ago?
So she came to me pretty serendipitously. I was in a small mastermind group, um, and one of the other women in that group, well, I say group, there was only like 3 of us, and so I think she was a friend of a friend, and so Amanda started working with uh, with this woman in my mastermind group, and I was kind of in that place of like thinking I need help. I've got all these tasks. I've been learning about virtual assistants. I've been, keeping a journal of all the things that I could hire a virtual assistant for, and that was kind of that's like a tip there of just leading up to when you are ready to pull a trigger, like have in mind what you're going to be hiring them to do. So I was doing that. I was creating all those lists and that sort of thing. And so I was like, oh, would you mind if I spoke to her too? And so I think we were her first 2 clients. And she's gone on to kind of create her own virtual assistant business, and she does also like social media management and stuff like
That's
that.
great.
And so she just kind of came through a friend of a friend sort of thing, and I spoke to her, and she was just completely just organized and on top of everything, and she's been amazing.
That's so great.
Yeah.
If you find the right person, whatever the arrangement is, honestly, if they're a full-time employee or if they're a part-time shared virtual assistant, if you find the right person to help you with your business tasks,
Yeah.
it literally is, and I'm not even being over exaggerating, it will change your life. Like,
Yeah.
literally, you will
Yeah.
feel less stressed. You will feel more in control. You'll feel like
Yeah.
you can actually have the time and space to do things that you want to do,
Yeah.
whether that's inside your business or just in your life.
Yeah.
It's so great.
I'd say it's addicting too, outsourcing.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
like, oh
It's
wait.
it's an addiction with very few side effects, I think, unless you like spend all your money and all your profits on you
Right.
know
Yeah. Yeah. Make sure your
people to shine
margins
your
are
shoes or whatever.
right. Right. But it's like, oh, what else could I give her to do? What else can she be doing? And You kind of think of all these little tasks that you could hand off.
I don't know if this would apply to some of the people listening to your podcast, but it occurs to me that it is tricky to figure out when is the right time to hire a virtual assistant. We'll just go with that, right?
Yeah.
And then whether or not, how to figure out if they can afford it. I think those
Yeah.
are two of the kind of roadblocks that I see the most often.
Yep. Absolutely.
And I think as far as when, I often make this comment on this, it's like, well, when's a good time to get a marriage therapist? And I think most of us would agree that, before you sign the divorce papers, right? So like
Right.
the answer is proactively,
Yeah.
and maybe before you think you need it, because we've seen this so many times where people are very busy, they're very overwhelmed, they're very disorganized, and then they're like, I need help, I need a virtual assistant. And then they come and they try to work with us, and then sometimes it has failed, I would say, because they were just too underwater to even like know how to grab the lifeboat. You know what I mean?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So if that makes sense, I
Yeah.
think you want to do it sooner than you think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing too that I learned was that it's more affordable than you think, like, because uh, there's tons of virtual assistants out there that you could use, onshore, offshore,
Mm-hmm.
different, price points, but you could also hire somebody for just like 5 hours a week. And I think that's how I started with Amanda, was like 3 to 5 hours a week, something like that. And
Right.
it's
Right.
grown from there. And she helps with more project management type stuff now. But at first it was like, okay, this is a stretch. This is an extra cost in my business. But then just seeing how it freed up so much more of my time, that I could get so much more done, was just amazing. Like, it was totally worth it.
Yeah. And it's a good idea to run the numbers, and because there could be a sense of like, I can't afford it, I don't have the money. Or sometimes people look at the cost of an assistant, honestly, whether it's $17 an hour or it's $45 an hour, it can feel like too much, and it can
Yeah.
feel like money that's going out that's not bringing money back in.
Yeah.
But if you take a look at your time and what it's worth, obviously you can't spend every waking hour seeing clients, so not every hour of your time is worth $200. But if you can get a virtual assistant and usually for a US based VA, the range is probably 25 to 45. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
You can find more specialized people that cost more. Maybe they're graphic designers, or their web designers should, cost more than $45, I hope.
Yeah.
A good one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
But for an admin assistant, essentially, $25 to $45, and look at your average fee. And if that's somewhere, let's just go with $100, just to keep a round number. And if you can find a good VA for $25, if you spend 1 hour seeing a client, you can actually pay for roughly 4 hours of admin support. That's a good deal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So usually the numbers look really good if you really take a look at them and kind of take your fear and anxiety and try to put it in the back seat.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And then I just think it's just, you got to take those baby steps, and then you'll learn too as you go,
Yeah.
if this is the right fit, if this is the right amount of hours each month or each week, that sort of thing. Because if done right, it can really free up your time, and then
Definitely.
you can make more money, obviously. And that's really the
Yeah.
goal. More money in less time.
100%. Is it okay if I share these 5 tips that I just wrote up this week for getting the help that you need?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
maybe that can be a little teaser for the free download that I'm creating right now.
Sounds good. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, we can
So I'm
link
just
all
going to
that
run through
stuff
them.
up in the show notes too.
We can jump into specifics if you want, but
Let's do it.
tip number 1 is to admit that you need help. Tip number 2, like we were talking about, calculate the value of your time. Number 3 is to accept that done is better than perfect.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yes.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, there's a lot of meat on that one.
Yeah.
Number 4 is to use our master resource list, basically simplify the way to find somebody you can trust, right? And then number 5 is start small, delegate something this week. So, and I've got, With each one of those tips, I've got sort of the problem that the therapist is facing, our insight, solution, and then like a simple step that they can take. But we
Yeah.
could probably jump in on like number 3, because
Yeah.
that is the other major hurdle that I see. Have you noticed
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. And I mean, the reason why I got excited about that is because it's something that I've learned myself, and and I work with a lot of different people, a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different personalities,
Hmm.
on their websites. And there are plenty of people that I've worked with or, discuss in our Facebook group where they're just afraid to pull the trigger or uh, put something out there, write their first blog, whatever it is. And I've really been using this analogy lately about investing, like especially with SEO, when people are like, how many times should I blog and putting content on my website? And it's like, well, it's kind of like investing. Like if you read all the books on investing, you're talking about, your rate of return, and especially when it comes to interest, like when's the best time to start investing is like now. If your money is not sitting in some sort of high interest yield, whatever, it can't do anything for you. So if your content is not on your website, if you're not adding content and blogs to your website, Google's not seeing that content, and every day that goes by is another day where somebody can't find you, that sort of thing. And so to me, it's more important, like, get it out there, get going, get your feet wet, that sort of thing, because at least it'll be doing something for you and for your business. So that's kind of
Right.
the context that I see it, and I often use it in my own business. And and for myself, like I wanted all my video content, all my blogs to be perfect when I first started. Now I'm just so excited to hit publish, not that I'm just putting out garbage. I want it to be good,
Right.
obviously,
Right.
but it's like, oh, well, I know that there's things that can help someone with what I'm putting out. So let me get this published. It's better out there than just in my head. So that's kind of
Totally.
my context for it.
Yeah, and that applies to, like you're saying, a therapist creating content and publishing it, and sort of, to use Seth Godin's book language, ship it, right? Get it
I haven't
out
read
there,
that one. Yeah.
and then iterate. I think it's called Ship or Ship It. It's a good one. It's a short book,
Cool.
basically just about that, about get it
Yeah.
done, get it out there. And so it applies to that for sure, and then it applies to outsourcing also, because the hurdle in my mind is, nobody can do intake calls like I can. I'm
Right.
really good at it, and they're not going to do it like I want it to be done. Fill in the blank for whatever the task is,
Yeah.
right? And then I think it's helpful to realize that 80% good is really good. If
Yeah.
somebody else is doing it and you don't have to do it.
Right.
And then if you find the right person and you have reasonably good communication and instructions, the job is going to get done.
Yeah.
And the trick for the therapist is to go a little hands off and let go of a little bit of control.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll end up micromanaging,
Right.
and your assistant or whoever you're working with will run away from you because they don't like that.
Right. I think part of it too, it just comes to mind, like, thinking about that is also owning your identity as a CEO, as a business owner.
Hmm.
You don't see the CEO of Nike answering the phones, for whatever. And so it's kind of like it takes a little bit to kind of make that mind shift to,
Right.
okay, I need to train up somebody because I need to make sure that I'm doing the most important tasks
Hmm.
in my business. And I know that my wife and I have had that conversation too on the same topic of, answering the phones, because she's thought about that. Like, I wonder if I can train somebody to answer the phones, but no one can do it like I do it. I'm like, yeah, obviously.
Yeah. I'll give you this sort of little insight from my experience. Um, Knowing where your wife is at in her group practice, one of the challenges early on, especially for somebody who's built up reputation in the community as being a quality therapist, is that the majority of those people calling, and Googling and finding the website are looking for her and want to work with
Yes.
her.
That's what we've
But
been running
she,
into already. Yep.
right, she's
Yep.
already busy and she wants to give clients to her contractors and not herself. So one of the things that happened to me was, when I first handed off the phones to my assistant, I thought the conversion rate's going to go down because I'm obviously such an amazing therapist and I can talk people into therapy like nobody else. Um, what ended up happening is the actual numbers went up which was a surprise.
Wow.
And I think part of that was that the person calling did not have the ability to work with the person on the phone.
Right.
My assistant was not a therapist. And no
Hmm.
matter how nice and empathetic and wonderful they were, they could not provide the service.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's a key sort of pivot point, whatever you want to call it, for a new group practice.
Yeah.
When somebody else is handling the intakes, then they can say, I'm sorry, the practice owner is full, not taking on new clients, but we've got this great person over here. So that's
Yeah.
really, really great.
Yeah. And I think that's also like kind of like instant uh authority building almost. It's like, ooh, they've got an assistant, they've got like, the person
For
handling the
sure.
phones, that sort of thing. Like, oh, this is a a group practice. Like this is a counseling center,
Right.
whatever you want to
Right.
call it. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. I think one thing that we've been kind of brainstorming is like I've been saying to her is like you need to not take on new clients. And so like
Hmm.
that's your first on those consultation calls like actually I'm not taking on new clients right now, but we've got
Right.
three, and I'm this is just my ideas. I'm not a therapist, I don't run a group practice, but it's just my
Hmm.
thought because it kind of creates that instant boundary of like, oh, I'm not taking anyone on right now, but I've got these other great clinicians who I work with and I'm overseeing or supervising whatever it is.
That's the way to go. Yeah. And even put it on the website, right?
Right. Yeah.
Not, currently full, not taking new clients. So when
Right.
the person gets on the phone, ideally they already know that would be
Right.
great.
Yeah.
That would be really nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's step by step. Nobody starts a group practice and has all this figured out. And like on day one, hires a practice manager and a clinical supervisor and a virtual assistant. It's
Right.
something you do as you grow and you
Yeah.
add
Yep.
layers. I love
Yep.
the quote from Michael Hyatt, who's an author, an amazing,
Yep.
amazing virtual mentor guy. He
Yeah. I love
says,
Michael Hyatt.
"Do you really? Oh, that's awesome."
Yeah. He's
He
great.
says, "If your dream doesn't require a team, your dream is too small."
Mm.
Right?
Yeah. Yep.
So dream big, and then build the team around you
Yep.
to achieve it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, this has been great. I feel like we can just kind of chat forever. Like
Oh,
I
for
love
sure.
I love talking about business. I love talking about productivity, team building, all that stuff. Is there any last words of wisdom you want to leave with us before we wrap up?
Well, there's so many things that I could share, but I will say on the topic of delegating and outsourcing that most therapists should not be building their own websites. Right. So if you happen to be listening to this and you're stuck on that point, definitely reach out for help because it's
Yeah.
so important to get that therapist or the website launched. And if you're not inclined to do it yourself, get help from somebody that knows about that. So there's my
Yeah.
my little pitch for your services right there.
Thank you. Amen to that. Yeah. With that, I will just tack on, like, as we talked about, having it out there is better than having it perfect. So I will say, if you're just
Hmm.
starting out, like, yes, get your website up there. So at least you have a place you can send people. But once you start rocking and rolling, start saving to invest in that website so that somebody can help you get found in Google and also, build a website that's built to convert people and get leads to your website. So yes,
So
amen to
important.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Good, good. And then if you want more details on the 5 simple steps to get the help you need, just go to productivetherapist.com and check it out.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll put all that stuff in the show notes for this episode. This is episode number 63. So
Look at you go. Nice.
privatepracticeelevation.com/63. And you'll find everything there so everybody can get the links and check out Productive Therapist and all that you're doing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Uriah. This has been awesome. It's been great to chat with you.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.